Originally from Dublin, Keith Costigan came up in the Irish youth system before spending 2 seasons in the League of Ireland with Bray Wanderers and Monaghan United. Following a brief stop at Luton Town, Costigan moved to the U.S. to accept a full soccer scholarship to Augusta State University. After finishing his college career at Cal State Bakersfield, he signed a 2-year deal with the USL Portland Timbers, led the team in assists and minutes, and appeared with the LA Galaxy during the Timbers off-season. Keith rounded out his professional career with the Harrisburg City Islanders before starting his broadcast career with Fox Sports. He currently co-hosts Super Sunday Plus and can also be heard commentating on international UEFA Cup and CONCACAF Champions League matches. He's also a regular contributor to The Cop magazine, a monthly publication that is published in Europe and is aimed at fans of Liverpool, and he's also a college coach at UC Irvine.
How do you describe promotion relegation to people?
Most fans that have a general knowledge of the English game or European game understand the concept. For those who don't, I explain it simply. Look, there's 20 teams in the league. The bottom 3 teams at the end of the season will be relegated to a lower league, and the top 3 teams in the next league, the championship, if we're talking about England, get the chance to be promoted. So a lot of people will ask, well, why did they do that? And again, I'll just say, it's a reward for the teams in the lower league who are doing well consistently to have the opportunity to play in the Premier League. And it's also a warning to those teams that try coast the way through being in the Premier League that, you have to fight to be there, whether it be in first position or towards the end of the table. It's not a given. It's or it's not a right to be there. It's something that's given to you, and you have to work hard to keep it. So, you know what? For the most part, most American fans that I talk to, when you explain it that way, they always come back with positive feedback on it and think it's a good concept.
Did you guys ever talk about promotion relegation on the Timbers when you were on USL Timbers?
Not really, no. I mean, it was just one of those things. We were a pretty successful team. Some of the players coming over, Michael O'Neill had played at Newcastle. Gavin Wilkinson, who's the GM there now, had played, at a high level. So we would definitely have conversations about, we want to go to the playoffs. The players actually enjoyed going to the playoffs. We saw it as a kind of cup competition at the end of the season, but we still wanted to win the regular season first. But we might make a couple of jokes every now and again talking about, well, it doesn't matter if we're down the bottom. It's not like we're going to get relegated or anything, which is kind of like probably not the attitude you want from your players, because you want them to fight, in every game, in every possible scenario. But no, I mean, it wasn't a case for discussion just because you knew it wasn't there.
Did you ever have a conversation with anybody on other teams on that back in those days? I mean, I guess what I'm thinking about is you were there during, from what I can, if my meshing my times right, you were there when people were practically marching in the streets to get into MLS.
Yes, yeah. For me, it was. I always believed that at that time, USL should have been the showcase for MLS, and at the time, I mean, this turned out to be wrong. So I believe Portland were outdrawing Seattle, outperforming Seattle at times as well in terms of bringing fans in and just showing themselves as a potential MLS team. So I always believed if Portland continued to do well, they should be given the opportunity. But it just didn't work out that way. It didn't matter if you won USL or MLS was going to handpick who they wanted to be the next franchise on a number of reasons. And so we definitely talked about the idea of, well, if we do well, it would be nice to go to MLS. But the reality is you could do outstanding, and it still wasn't a guarantee that you were going to be moved up to the top league.
Did any of the guys you played with make the transition to MLS?
Not the ones that I played with. I mean, Gavin was one of my teammates. He went over to the front office and, has become a very, very good general manager at the club and, brought Caleb Porter there. So not many made the jump. I was a little bit early in the USL experience. So I don't know if Alan Gordon might have been one. Or he had already gone on to MLS, I think, by then. So they certainly had players that went to MLS, but I'm not sure how many they kept over from USL moving forward.
What do you think are the impediments to making promotion relegation work in the United States?
Well, first off, I understand. There's a lot of Twitter buzz on relegation, and I know you're one of the proponents of it, and I'm for it. But sometimes I get abused because I explain why it's not going to happen.
Right.
I think for me, it is the best system because, I've got into some American sports while I'm here, and I'm listening to the Laker commentators last week on the radio, and they're saying, well, we should just tank these last 2 games and get a better draft pick. And I'm like, what on earth? How can a team go into a game and want to lose? It's a disgrace to me. And the only way around that is we'll give them something to fight for. And that would be fighting for their lives in the top division. So for me, it's a perfect model because you have every game mattering. You see it in the Premier League, Crystal Palace over the last few weeks, Sunderland over the last week. These are teams that are fighting, but for different reasons.
It's so fun to watch those Instagrams and the Vines that are coming out with the teams, the promotions, the celebrations are...
It's incredible. And if you watch the final day, a lot of times some of the funnest celebrations are teams that have just held on to their Premier League status or are coming up. It's incredible to watch. And these players are playing at a high level because of it. And we're seeing good competition all around. Now, the reasons why it won't happen or the barriers to it happening over here is because MLS has already begun on a structure that's not based on ability or how a team is done on a lower level to become an MLS team.
Right.
They're talking to owners like Arthur Blank, who will come in Atlanta as an MLS owner. Now they're asking Arthur Blank to put up $70 million. And part of this deal is he is guaranteed parts of MLS revenue moving forward, revenue with some of the friendly games that they do in the summer, but also the opportunity to play against the likes of LA Galaxy, Seattle Sounders, have these teams visit Atlanta year in, year out. Mm-hmm. On the other side, they will not tell an owner like Arthur Blank, well, you're going to drop down a division and you're going to play the likes of Harrisburg and Charlotte and these kind of teams, and it's up to you to make sure your team continues to play at a top level. We understand it because we watch European soccer, but American owners, it's not just soccer. There's no other sport where you get relegated. You begin afresh at the start of every year. So they just... The ownership side will not buy into it. And unfortunately, at this stage, MLS is still a selling market in terms of selling themselves to places like Atlanta and owners like Arthur Blank. And as long as MLS has this model, it is not going to happen.
Do you think MLS success is contingent on the D1 status they get from U.S. Soccer?
No, it's a very good question. MLS will be successful because it has... I don't want to say a monopoly, but it has the money, it has the financial backing over the course of a year or two. But MLS is where players are going to want to play because there's more money on offer. We can say what we like about players being romantics and playing for the love of a jersey or love of a shirt, but MLS has that monopoly in terms of the relationship with US soccer, the revenue to attract the top players in this country. So it's always going to be where the best players gravitate to.
Well, let me try to trap you in a different way then. Do you think MLS losing D1 status would hurt the league?
I'm not sure what you mean by D1 status because
I'm just with the sanction they get from U.S. Soccer for being a first division league and the CONCACAF Champions League positions that go with it, and the players in other countries and fans in other countries understanding that what D1 means in terms of status. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I understand. Look, I'll put it this way: the Russian Premier League over the last 10 years, I mean, this time 10 years ago was nowhere. Then all of a sudden money became involved, and you saw the likes of Samuel Eto'o going to Russia. You saw several other top players. Players are going to gravitate to where the money is, and MLS has built up enough status to continue to be a league that has the money to attract top players. So whether it is given that status as the top league in the country, I don't think it makes a difference. I don't think there's too many players in Europe saying, I'm not going to come to the LA Galaxy unless they've qualified for CONCACAF Champions League. So I get your point and I understand where you're going with it, but I hate to be that person that says everything's about money. But players, if we're attracting players from Europe right now, the reality is it's going to be location and money. Money first, then location second.
Do you think players understand the sort of the disparity in pay that's going on in the MLS right now, and do you think that has an effect on their decision? I mean, someone like Clint Dempsey or Michael Bradley coming over and making exponentially more than some of the guys they're starting next to. Does that come into a player's mind, do you think?
I think it does, and I think it's funny because over the last year we've opened a little bit of a door to American soccer players, and I'm always a believer in I'd rather give American players money and give them the opportunity to shine and try to keep the best young players here. So having someone like Bradley coming in, is he overpaid? Yes, but you had to do that to get him in the league. But I think over the course of the growth of MLS, there is going to start to be issues because you can't continually give players like Jose Villarreal $50,000 a year, or younger players such a low level of money, and at the same time have a player who commands maybe 70% of the salary within your team. So I think as the league grows, there will be issues. It's why you see a lot of young American players going to the likes of Germany, other countries like that to get a better pay deal themselves.
Right.
So I do. I think that's one of the concerns that they're going to have going forward. I think we're seeing a lot more homegrown contracts and the contracts be a little bit healthier in terms of how much they're putting in those contracts. But yeah, you can continually have. It's not like basketball where you have one or two top earners and then the rest is made up, because football is a much bigger squad, and it's not as individualized as some of the other American sports. So it is going to be a difficult issue for them moving forward, and they're going to have some issues with some of the younger American players who'll start to feel like, hey, we deserve more money if we're going to stay in this league.
Do you think, looking back, I've never really seen MLS get a World Cup bump in any way, shape, or form. And I actually just compiled a sort of a quick graph of MLS Cup ratings and noticed that they've, for the English language, they're at the lowest level now, and the trend is definitely downward. But do you think bringing back Dempsey and Bradley? I mean, it seems to me that MLS is banking on a bump here. Do you think they're going to get it?
Yeah, it's a World Cup year, so I think MLS it's a difficult one in terms of TV ratings over the last year. It is something that they know is an area that they have to work on. You can bring in David Beckham and he'll bring fans to the stadium, but how does that translate to fans watching at home on television? So it's something they're aware of. I definitely think in a World Cup year, having American players that were watching during the World Cup, because it is a casual fan viewing in terms of the World Cup. So I do think they're banking on the fact that casual fans will all of a sudden start tuning into MLS games. Will it translate? I don't know. It's difficult because casual.
You've no doubt you've been in a bar when a World Cup game ends and an MLS game comes on. I mean, it's a. I don't know that it's any less of a brutal transition now than it was 5 years ago. Maybe it is.
Yeah, no, it's difficult. There's so many sports here, and it's funny because I hear people talking about baseball, and we know when to watch. I don't think baseball does particularly good numbers on television too. So it is difficult because it's not a sport where you can tell the person this is where something's going to happen. This is the fourth quarter. It's a sport that you have to be attentive to, and it doesn't always translate for the casual fan.
Right.
And look, the word casual is in there for a reason, because they will tune in when they feel like it, when it's a World Cup, when it's a big US game or whatever it might be. But the reality is not a lot of them stick moving forward.
It seems like promotion relegation develops a different kind of fan, and maybe one that's more passionate versus the casual fans that perhaps are endemic to more US sports and the ones that MLS is trying to grab. Do you think that's a fair comparison?
You're saying promotion relegation promotes the more passionate fan?
I think so. It's just the system somehow it feels to me like there's a tie between supporter and team that doesn't exist in our kind of league structure.
Okay, I'll put it this way. I'll go back to my Lakers example. Mm-hmm. The Lakers are playing last week. Their fans aren't really showing up. The tickets are lower. And the commentators are saying, let's tank these last few games.
Yeah.
Change it. The Lakers are playing tonight. If they lose, there's the potential that they're not in the NBA next year. They're in the NBA Developmental League. All of a sudden, fans are showing up, right?
Yeah.
Fans are going, we don't want to lose our Lakers. We have to be here. We have to cheer them on. Now, all of a sudden, there's an added TV component as well, because it makes it must viewing. These are people playing for their lives in this league. So look, if you love the game and you're at the stadium and all of a sudden you hear, hey, we're not just 6 wins and 15 losses into the season, we're 2 losses away from not being in MLS. It has to translate.
Our survival is at stake, and you play a role, right?
Look,
it seems like Americans. It seems like that could be a selling point. That could drive ratings. That could drive interest.
Oh, I definitely think so. I think you have to be looking at things from a unique perspective. This is something unique to our sport. You don't have it in other sports. How can you compete with this? Not only are they going to finish bottom of the table, they're not even going to be in the league next year. Look, winning is the all-important, is the number one. But just surviving, man, they celebrate like they won the Premier League too.
That's what changed. I mean, that's what changed me. When I was watching Fulham 10 years ago, fighting for their lives, it was the most compelling spectacle I'd ever seen.
Well, you remember Danny Murphy was one of the biggest heroes of the season when he scored that goal. And Danny Murphy is someone I've dealt with when I go back home. And, he still gets bought drinks by Fulham fans because it's like, wow, you saved us. That was so big.
And his quotes were so great. Like, I wasn't even really supposed to be up there.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing is Fulham finished 17th, but everybody remembers them from that season as well. They hung up by the skin of their teeth. If that was an American concept of MLS, it would have been Fulham playing out the season. They'll be back next year. So, yeah, you can tend to sit back as a fan and relax rather than sit forward on the edge of your seat. So, again, when I say I don't think relegation will happen, that's not me saying I don't think it should happen. I think it would be absolutely incredible and unique to our sport and would give us an edge over other sports.
I guess part of me thinks that, and I'm the guy who I used to think that you could tell MLS what to do. And I used to sort of think there's got to be a way, U.S. Soccer can just come in and say, MLS, it's time for you to take promotion relegation and you have to deal with it. But I'm kind of evolved, and now I'm thinking, let's just, why can't we carve out a space for MLS outside of the pyramid if they want to do that, be a domestic-only league, and open a pyramid and see what happens in that realm next to MLS and see how that goes. Do you think... What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, again, it's just always going to be difficult because you carve MLS away from everything else. You give it that elite status too. I understand the concept of, well, let's have a more natural structure where there is promotion, relegation in other leagues. Mm-hmm. But the reality is you do get some of the hardcore fans, but you won't get them all because they, as hardcore as we are, we want to watch the top players too. And if the top players are continually gravitating towards MLS, it's going to be difficult. Would it be enjoyable? Yes. Would it earn the money and I guess it would be kind of like having a Hollywood blockbuster movie. Like, this is going to gross more money year in, year out. Does that mean it's a better movie than the small budget movie that everybody says was well directed and well produced? No. But it's always going to continue to make more money and attract the bigger name stars. And that's ultimately what people are going to go and watch.
True, but everybody does love the Cinderella story in NCAA basketball, right? I mean, it seems as though Americans there might be a way to play this where you could gain a lot of support and gain a lot of attention by being, that underfunded team that makes it happen against all odds.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is a point, for me coming over, it took me an awful long time to understand NCAA basketball and why it was so big, and I'm like, well, hang on, these guys are amateurs, and this is, but it is proof that it doesn't have to be top level or elite level that captures the imagination of people, but the structure would have to be there, and there would have to be some sort of backing, and I don't know if it's quite possible. If the right people are ready to get behind it fully to make it successful, and to be successful, it would have to happen over a course of time as well. But going back to MLS, and one of the reasons why probably relegation isn't on the table is because since 1996 and 97, the league has grown. I don't think there can be any doubt about that. The players that it attracts. And growth promotes a couple of things. It's, better revenue for teams, better visibility, but it doesn't promote change in structure. And that's why you see the calendar that we're in right now. Why change? Because it's already working this way. Mm-hmm. Why tinker with it? Because it's already working this way. So because it's been successful in terms of moving forward, adding teams, charging more for franchises, which is, look, it's a business as well. It makes it difficult for the top men to turn around and say, we're going to switch it. We're going to switch it and go a different direction. And that's one of the scary parts for them in terms of saying, okay, now we're going to add relegation in.
Do you have any fond memories of U.S. Open Cup from your Islanders Timbers days?
Yeah, I think it's a great competition. I think it's an underutilized competition. Look, I'm a fan. I live in a city where there's 2 MLS teams, and I could not tell you when the U.S. Open Cup games are. So it just gets absolutely no press. I think, again, it's a knockout competition. It's a one-off knockout competition. I think it could, it's a tremendous asset in the footballing world that is not utilized very well.
Did your teams get fired up for it though?
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a big thing for us to know that, we had the opportunity to go in and play against MLS teams. And it was a big carrot for some of the younger teams. I know I've dealt with Ventura County Fusion over the last few years. I know obviously Warren at San Diego Flash. It is a big thing for these teams. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to capture the same press as an FA Cup where you'd see Stevenage taking on Newcastle, where we're going, okay, wow, can Stevenage really pull this off? I don't think it's because the fans don't want to get involved in that. It's because we don't get the right press behind it. Nobody seems to be interested in covering it in a major way. So I think it's an asset that is underutilized. Yes.
Were you ever able to go up against an MLS team in Timbers or Islanders?
I can't remember. I know we played San Jose Earthquakes and we beat them, but I don't know whether that was US Open Cup or whether it was just it was a friendly. So you'll have to check. I remember that because I set up the winner in the game, and I have to plug that one. But I don't remember whether that was US Open Cup. And I know at Harrisburg we lost in the head-to-head with Pittsburgh, I think it was. So we didn't end up going on, and the players were genuinely devastated. Because you want to play DC United, you want to play. Look, you're a smaller league team. Of course, you want to pick on the big boys. So for the younger or for the smaller teams and the USL teams or whoever it might be, they want to play US Open Cup. The issue is MLS teams don't seem to want to market it in any way, and it just seems to fall by the wayside.
What would you do if you were at US Soccer? If I could put you on the spot to improve the tournament?
I would make it a weekend game. I would look for me as well. It's one of my issues with the league is games are all over the place. I don't know what times games start at the weekend. What time is Portland's game at this weekend? 6. Well, next week it's at 1. If you have US Open Cup exactly like first weekend of January, that's FA Cup third round. For me, you do it. You make it a weekend and you say, look, this is the Giants against David against Goliath. We make sure we can have the matchups. This is where the MLS teams come in. If you want to seed it, so be it. If you want to do an open draw, so be it. But you give it the right platform and you put all the games on one day. We could have it where it's okay. MLS teams gone out today. 3 teams have already been knocked out, and so on. And we make the MLS teams a little bit more accountable for their actions in the tournament too. Because if we're hiding it on a Tuesday night, nobody's going to really care.
Now, back in the 1920s, you probably know this, but
I wasn't there.
But the big point of contention and what caused one of the biggest conflagrations in American club soccer history was ASL, the big team, the big league at the time, pulling out of U.S. Open Cup or consistently battling and ending up pulling out because of revenues and scheduling. And Adrian Hanauer referenced this a little while, probably a year ago now, that some MLS owners want to kill U.S. Open Cup. Do you think that's in the cards? Do you think they can do that? Do you think MLS will pull out? Do you think this will be? Sunil seems to have done a pretty good job keeping the peace on this, and I'm just kind of curious if you've seen anything that leads you to believe that might fall apart.
Well, look, if you continue to build at the top end of the tree and you forget about the rest, eventually it falls apart. So, to me, it would be awful for U.S. Soccer to get rid of U.S. Open Cup because it's been there for so long. It's just a tournament right now that isn't utilized in the correct manner. So in the form that it's in right now, is it useful for MLS teams? No. But could you make it a better way by giving it its own weekend? This is U.S. Open Cup. it doesn't even have to be, it's 2 or 3 rounds where you give it that Saturday, you give it whatever day it is, and you promote it like the David against Goliath, and you're giving not just MLS a boost, but you're giving some of these smaller teams a boost. And that in essence is what US soccer should be all about. It's not just about feeding the big boys and the owners who've put the big franchise fees down, but it's also the grassroots level and the teams like Harrisburg and the teams like Charlotte who continue to play and play at a high level despite not having the financial backing.
Does NASL deserve Champions League spots?
It's a different one. I have a couple of players playing there, and I think it's a league that's getting better. But I don't think it's going to happen. It's again, MLS has a monopoly on it. They're the top league in this country. The fact that there's entry barriers into the league, maybe NASL could put forth the argument that they deserve an opportunity to play in the competition, but I just don't see how that would work with 2 leagues from the same country. It works with Canada, obviously. Toronto during their awful times, not that this year, we'll see how they perform this year, but during their awful times would get into the Champions League because of their Canadian status. But I just don't know how it would work in the world. Governing bodies would look to it with 2 leagues, feeding teams to the same competition.
What about the New York Cosmos? Do you think, how close are the New York Cosmos, fitting in, without being an MLS, but being able to complete one-on-one with an MLS team?
I don't know how much did they draw on their home opener.
No, the stadium only fits. I'm not even 100% sure what the capacity is, but yeah, nothing comparable to what Sporting KC gets at this point.
Yeah, and again, it's if you're playing in a stadium that has smaller crowd capacity, even if you continually sell it out, your revenue streams will never allow you to take you to compete on a daily level with MLS teams on the field. I think Cosmos have everything to compete off the field. They have the name, they have the history, and they have the nostalgic memories of that team. But long term, it's going to be very, very difficult because I know you have investment now, but investment eventually dries up if there's no return on that investment. And where is that investment? Where is the return on that investment going to be if it's not through the turnstiles or through TV revenue? And we've already seen that can be very difficult to get.
Do you think MLS is moving in on places like Miami and Atlanta and Minnesota and some of the other rumored spots where NASL teams are to compete directly with NASL? I mean, to break it right down, is MLS being predatory with NASL?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use predatory. I think they're definitely looking at markets, and it's almost like that player playing in a club team and then he's snapped up by the bigger club. And is it wrong? Probably, but are they going to continue to do it? Yes. Funnily enough, some of the markets that they are looking in, Atlanta, I think everybody has reservations over whether it can be a fully fledged MLS market in the sense of what they're asking for from the teams. Florida, they've already been there, but yeah, I think they've seen that there's an interest there through the Orlando team and then in Minnesota through the Minnesota team as well. So the reality is most of the Fairweather fans will show up at the MLS Atlanta team, some of them being people that have already shown up at the Silverbacks game the year before. You'll have some diehard fans. If I'm a Silverbacks fan in Atlanta, I'm staying a Silverbacks fan, but others more likely to start going and watching MLS games.
Is TV the driving force, you think, of MLS moving into these markets? I mean, it seems as though Atlanta, there are places like San Antonio and some other places that might be certainly have screamed out for MLS a little bit louder than Atlanta. I mean, I'm getting the feeling this is a TV move. Do you share that as a TV guy?
100%. Yeah, it's there's no doubt about it. You have strategic television markets. I don't think MLS even tried to hide the fact that this is the biggest television market left that did not have an MLS franchise. So
and one that gets huge World Cup ratings, and I mean, along with Miami.
Yeah, and that's all things that they looked upon. Obviously, the fact that Arthur Blank is an owner who's shown that he's willing to spend money and get behind his team. So all of those play into it, but definitely they're going to look at TV markets. And I agree. Some of the smaller markets or smaller television markets like San Antonio and Minnesota even may present a better fan culture for MLS teams, but TV would probably be a bigger driving force. You just need to look. When MLS first came in, the areas that it picked, it didn't pick the teams that they thought would have the best fan base. LA was the market. New York was the market. And if you look further on, some of the biggest grossing teams in MLS now are teams that were added later. Portland Timbers and Seattle Sounders being just two of those teams.
Can you give us any inside scoop on how the MLS TV contract is shaping up, or how it's being looked at over at Fox?
That's something that wouldn't be in my ballpark or part of my day to day.
Should they be worried, you think, at this point? I mean, as of 3 months ago, it was a foregone conclusion that the thing was in the final works, and then days drag on, and we don't hear anything else really about it.
No, I think. Look, I don't speak for Fox, certainly. But I do know that anybody I've dealt with in the television industry has a commitment to getting these games on TV and providing a high quality, pre-game show, post-game show, highlight shows, everything. They want MLS to be given the treatment that other leagues are given over here. So it has every time, trying to attract that viewership. So MLS has, how should I say, those relationships with the television channels, and they'll continue to sign good television deals going forward. As in terms of details, again, I wouldn't be the one to talk about it, but MLS will be just fine. I know that.
Okay, let's talk about Soccer United marketing for a minute. I think you would agree that Soccer United marketing is the marketing arm of MLS, and they profit by marketing imported soccer. And I think we've all heard, as MLS brings in this money from these marketing arrangements, that's more money they have to spend on MLS team, sort of like a trickle down theory on that. By the way, when you come into MLS, you get, this is speculation a little bit, but you may get a chunk of sum worth about $20 million. You think is this a healthy relationship, or should we take another look at it?
We don't want European teams to be able to come over here, set up, play games against each other, and walk away with the profits. Because that's not good. I know it's good for fans, but it's not good for U.S. soccer. Right. How is that built in U.S. soccer? Right. If Real Madrid play Barcelona and they each get $5 million, and we rent a stadium, and so I think some is there to make sure that if there's games happening in America, American soccer and U.S. soccer profit from those games. So for me, that's a good thing, and it's proven to be a good thing, because year in, year out, we have top teams from all over Europe still coming here, and at the same time giving fans, I'm a Liverpool fan. Liverpool will be here this year, and I'll be covering those games, and it gives us an opportunity to see some of our European heroes close up. But it also it's good to know that some of that money that's being raised over here is going back into the U.S. soccer system to be used on other things. Look, we can knock U.S. soccer, but they have put money back into the development academy system. They are trying to build an infrastructure there as well. So there is good things being done with that money, and I think it's a healthy relationship.
Speaking of development, and is there anything that you would point to in a promotion relegation system that would increase player development, or do we have things straight? Is there anything endemic to our system that doesn't work so well for player development, looking back over the past half century? It's sort of, as Klinsmann said, the pyramid is upside down. It seems to me it turns the pyramid right side up, and it gives clubs a lot more power to empower coaches who then can do their jobs, and coaches then aren't dependent on the pay-to-play system and parents paying in.
Look, I've studied. I've got my UEFA A license and I've got my USA license, so I've gone through both structures in terms of how development should work. pay to play is a completely awful way of developing players, because I've seen it. I wouldn't be involved in it, because simply put, players are in teams because their parents pay. Once parents pay, they feel they can have a say in how things are run, and you're not getting the best development for some of the best players on that team. So if you ever go to club games, you'll notice there's 3 or 4 good players, and then the rest make up the team. Well, the rest are usually the ones that are paying.
Designated players, as one might say.
It is that kind of structure. What the Development Academy has done, I've worked with Chivas USA and Galaxy here as well, and what they've done is say, look, we're going to give the best players at club the opportunity to come here and play for free. You're going to get good coaching, you're going to get more coaching, but you're also in a position where nothing is given. So and if you look at the relegations, promotion relegation through the youth system in England, it's not there. Premier League youth academy teams aren't judged on the results. If Liverpool finish bottom of the youth Premier League, they're not going to get relegated. They have to put a certain amount of money in each year for development, and that's the way it should be. But what you're seeing now is players that are playing for their places year in, year out. The Galaxy will review at the end of every season. If players are good enough, they will move on. If they're not, they'll be replaced by other players. It's not about parent involvement. It's not about who's playing. So for me, the academy structure is helping to develop and enhance the youth level of our game, because instead of 5 club teams in the neighborhood, each having 3 top players, all of those top players come together. Practices all of a sudden are of a higher standard. You've seen MLS youth teams go and play very well against foreign opposition. So it's a good thing. And it's almost like promotion relegation, but on an individual level. You're promoted up to an academy team at the end of the season. If it's not working out, someone else will take it and you'll be let go. So it's more cutthroat. Some parents don't like it, but they're generally the ones whose kids wouldn't make it anyway. But it's a much better system, and we're going to start seeing the rewards of that. I think we already have, but moving forward, it'll get even better.
So you think Klinsmann's had a positive impact so far, all the way up and down the system?
Yeah, and I think for Jurgen, when I took my UEFA course, one of the questions was, what is the job of a national team coach? And we all gave our answers, and the simple answer is his job is to win games with the national team. So he's doing his job, but it's also nice to know that he does have one eye on the academy structure. His son's actually a very good goalkeeper in the academy system. So I do think he's having his say, but I do feel for the most part he's allowing the people involved in the academy structure to be their own people as well. He's not ruling with an iron fist or anything like that. He's focusing on the national team, but I do think he is having, or his ideas are having an effect on the whole system moving forward. But I don't think it's just Jurgen. I think it's US soccer as a whole saw that it was as important to have an academy structure.
Well, moving back to MLS for a second, David Beckham was nearly badgered into saying that he wanted to pull the MLS salary cap. Do you think that helps him or hurts him with MLS, and do you agree?
It's without naming names. I had a call a couple of weeks ago from a Premier League player, and he asked me to talk to certain coaches. This is going to be a very vague story. I spoke with an MLS coach, and he told me to go back to the player and said he had 150,000 in cap space, and the player said, "I'm on 50,000 a week." I can put it out there, this player is not going to be a part of MLS moving forward. But the point is, English players, European players don't understand the salary cap, the structure, and what it's about. And David, I still think, is of the belief, if I'm making the money, if the club is making the money, we should be able to spend it. And there's probably certain clubs in MLS who make more money than others and feel like, well, if I'm making more money, I should be able to spend more money. I'm not a fan of restrictions, but we have to be careful, because if we open up the salary cap and teams start spending ridiculous money, are we putting ourselves in a position where the league cannot sustain itself? And you look to Europe too. There's teams in La Liga who have not been able to pay the wages of their players. That's a situation you don't want to be in MLS. And look, it's been around for a while, but it's still in its infancy. we have to be very careful. As much as we want to say we're like everyone else, we don't want a salary cap. I don't know if the league can sustain all of a sudden just opening things up and not having a barrier in terms of how much we spend, because when you have a restriction on how much you spend, it makes it easier to monitor the spending and predict the revenues moving forward. If you don't have that, it becomes more and more difficult.
Now, for me, in looking back at, and a lot of people would evoke NASL of the 70s in this and say, yeah, there's a great example, and I'm glad you didn't do that. Because for me, that's this whole spending and the spending threatening the league. And yeah, I understand the situation to a degree in Spain, but the system in which the overspending has a great record of creating collapse is the closed league system.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. It's just... it's the one area that I would be very, very careful about changing.
I mean, I guess it's one thing I would say, if you're going to pull the caps, it almost automatically begs an open league question.
Yeah, okay, exactly. Look, if New York Cosmos then are prepared to spend more than you, well then, and have a better team and have a better product on the field, why should they not be given the right to open up and be a part of that league, via promotion, or whether it be another team gets relegated because they do struggle financially. I agree. I think if you have a system that is open in terms of how much you're willing to spend, then it becomes a case of a more open league structure. But again, you go back to the franchise fee. Right. One of the reasons the franchise fee is attractive is because you're telling owners we have a salary cap in place, so they know when they're doing the business reports or the financial forecasts, this is how much we're going to spend. If you open it, it becomes a little bit more different. And owners here like the idea of parity. They like the idea that my team can compete.
Now, doesn't it though? But the whole parity argument gets weird for me, and I guess just because it's a foregone conclusion for me that if an NFL team outspends another NFL team 10-1. They're always going to win that game, but that doesn't seem to hold true in soccer. It seems like it's a different, that there are a lot more intangibles, and it's not necessarily the same thing. Or NBA, if an NBA team spent 10 times more, okay, they're going to win 99% of the games against a team that spends 10% of their salary. But isn't it different in soccer? Isn't it? It feels to me like soccer is different, in just that the underdogs win a little bit more often than they would under the same salary conditions in these other American sports.
Agreed. It is more possible, but who are the top two spending teams in Spain? Who are the top two teams spending in the Premier League? So I understand Liverpool break in and this year and it can be done. I think your issue is, and it's an area that anybody can touch upon, is some of the people in charge in the general manager positions in MLS, and even going down to the coaching positions, are simply not qualified to be in those positions. And they don't know how to spend money, and they're still looking at players in the wrong way. They're looking at it, the structure of NFL with having a GM and signing players. I know some of these people personally. They're not in the right position. They shouldn't be making footballing decisions on players who are coming in and how much we're paying these players. That's where the issue goes, and that's probably why spending money in MLS hasn't always equated to being successful, mainly because you have the wrong people making the decisions.
And sort of on that foregone conclusion note, one of the things that drives me nuts, and I think Seattle is a great counterpoint to this right off the bat, but somebody like Arthur Blank automatically assuming that even in 2017 they're going to have to close off half their stadiums, and in Atlanta especially, where you could pack that stadium with the right Mexican team match. I mean, it seems, and you go back to the Cosmos and watch them fill the stadiums in the 70s, and you can go back to the 1920s if you really want to, and watch the stadiums fill for soccer matches back then. But this foregone conclusion seems, do you think it's rational? It always feels to me like they jump a little too quickly to these conclusions.
What conclusion do you mean in terms of
jumping to these conclusions that the D1 American club cannot draw with the foreign competition, 5-6 years out from now, and then by the way, throwing in MLS is going to be a top league by 2020. All of it seems to get a little funky for me.
No, yeah. First of all, we wanted to have teams with soccer specific stadiums, our home, our place, rather than sharing with other major sports in America. So for me, that's always an issue. I think in Seattle, they had cordoned off a certain area of that stadium, Seahawks Stadium, and then all of a sudden it was less and less, and they were drawing bigger crowds for games. But unfortunately, all they can go on is history. And yes, Mexico in Atlanta will sell out, but if they leave the stadium open, I think the point that they're trying to make is they're trying to be real. And can Atlanta attract 60, 70,000 on a regular basis to games? I'd like to think so, but let's be honest here, probably not, because if they could, they would have been in MLS a long time ago, because the clamor would have been there. Even with the stadium cordon off, I still have high reservations about whether they can fill that as well. I think the point they were trying to make is they were trying to backtrack on the fact that, look, we know we said we need teams with soccer-specific stadiums. This isn't one, but we're going to still make it a soccer-specific atmosphere. But I hear what you're saying, but sometimes we can't, as much as we're fans, we can't live in a fairy tale world of, well, we want to get this crowd. It's unless you're having Cristiano Ronaldo's and Lionel Messi's and these kind of players in your games, it's very difficult for US teams to attract crowds like that. Because look in Europe, you look in the Premier League right now, the stadiums aren't full in every game. Manchester City wasn't full today. So look, we want that, but is it realistic? Not right now. It's not.
Is MLS moving back to the football and the Yankee Stadium? Do you think is that moving back to MLS .1, or are they just doing this short term and hoping for the best coming down the road?
I hope not, because part of the beauty of the growth of MLS has been, Portland Timber Stadium, Sporting Kansas City Park. I don't know whether you've been to any games in any of these areas or these stadiums, but good atmosphere.
Well, I used to go to DC United games back when MLS was just getting started, and it felt real to me back then, for sure.
Yeah, and DC has probably tailored off a little bit over the last few years in terms of numbers, and obviously it's an aging stadium. But I think when you go to Crew Stadium, any of these soccer-specific stadiums, the atmosphere is absolutely incredible, and I think if it was me, I would have made it, a definite requirement that we have a stadium that's more to our liking or to our tailoring, rather than going back into, the bigger NFL stadiums or the baseball stadiums. I don't think that's a good move. You can say things are short term. We can only hope they're short term, but it would be a major step back if we continue to see MLS soccer games in NFL stadiums or baseball stadiums.
Collective bargaining agreement coming up with MLS. What do you big salary cap increase, change in the designated player rule? What do you think?
There'll be a big salary cap increase, yes. Maybe not to the designs that David Beckham would like, but there will be an increase. I've talked to some players, and it was funny. I actually just talked to a player yesterday, and we were talking about his plans at the end of the season. And he was like, well, yeah, I'll probably be in Europe for a while because we could be on strike for a while. So it seems like, word among the players is we're ready for the long haul on this one if we have to, I think last time the players were quite fair with the owners. But this time the players are saying, look, moving forward, there's big franchise fees being bandied about. There's a lot of money being put in. We want to make sure we're all looked after. I'm not too sure on the designated player rules, what way that's going to work. But I definitely think we're going to see a hike in the salary cap, and it's needed because some of the players that make up the squad being on 36,500 is just not good enough.
I mean, it's lower than the cost of living in many MLS cities. A lot of these players are making.
It really is, and to call yourself a professional athlete, what a manager at Enterprise Rent-A-Car might make is it's just not right.
So, do you think the promotion relegation debate is having an impact? I mean, is MLS hearing it? Is it causing? Is it a healthy thing? Is it an unhealthy thing? I mean, will it?
Well, I think. Look, I don't know whether you saw the documentary last week on Hillsborough, and you saw people constantly fight for justice. They believed in a cause, and they continue to fight for it. And without the voices of those people that were behind this cause and behind the the call for justice within the Hillsborough case, it would never have happened. So I think anytime you have a group of people, and Ted, I know you're one of those that is a big fan of it, you have to continue to talk. And you know, sometimes I bet people like yourself will go, man, I thought Keith was with us, man. He keeps saying that it's not going to happen. But I'll continue to say I want it, you know?
Yeah. I understand the question. I mean, I understand why MLS can't do it. And I get it 100%. I think there are ways to make a transition. I think if U.S. Soccer just goes ahead and decides and makes a move towards this model and maybe makes provisions for MLS, there's a way that it can be done. I mean, I guess another sort of an insider question that I have for lots of people is, MLS owns the trademarks to all of their teams. Is there a scenario in which MLS could sell those trademarks out of the league and basically sell a team out of MLS? I mean, you see anything like that happening?
I have no idea, but I mean, you look at the market here. You have LA Galaxy and Chivas USA. You would imagine that Chivas' name will disappear at the end of the season, and whether that be someone has the opportunity to pick that up, I'm not sure. So there's plenty of talking points, but I think the main one with promotion and relegation and teams going up and down is, if we continue to have the argument, everybody has to stand up and take note. And you might not always get the answers that you want, but if you continue to speak long enough, your voice will be heard. So I love it. I want promotion, relegation. I don't see it happening anytime soon, but you know, 25 years ago, people didn't think there'd be a Major League Soccer league here in America, and there is. So you got to keep fighting for it, and the leaders in arguing for it, like yourself, have to continue to make their voices heard. And you know, I'll certainly support it as much as I can.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Keith.